Thank you all so much for joining. Hopefully you can see myself and my colleague Jyotsna here on the webcam. So again, we've got a good group of attendees here. Again, there's the chat feature, feel free to use that. And then you'll also notice there's a questions feature. So throughout the webinar, if you chat questions here, we'll try to address those kind of in the moment if we can. But worst case scenario, we've left a good bit of time at the end of this for some Q&A, so we can also go through those and kind of speak to them one at a time when we get to that portion of the presentation. So hopefully everyone can hear me, and again, thank you for making the time to join us. So my name is Richard Sims. I'm one of the founders here at Tyrannosaurus Tech, and obviously myself and Jyotsna are going to co-present for the webinar this morning. So the first, and of course the topic is getting started with app development. So to start things off, I do want to tell you all a little bit about Tyrannosaurus Tech, mostly just so you have some context on why we're presenting on this topic, you know, why this is something we are knowledgeable about and excited about to kind of put out there to the community. So we're here in Atlanta, Georgia, and we're a leading custom software development and design agency. And so essentially, you know, what that means is our team is made up of very sharp developers and designers, you know, that spend their days designing and building out custom software, typically web applications, mobile applications. We do a lot in terms of SaaS products that we work on, that sort of thing. So you can see here just kind of a list of some of our areas of expertise. You know, when we're talking about design, we're really referring to, you know, mapping out like a user experience, really a lot of focus on building products that are intuitive, that, you know, drive desired user behaviors. So there's a lot of science behind that, and something we're really passionate about in our approach. We also are lucky we get to work with like a lot of early stage businesses. So early concepts, kind of prototyping, consulting, that sort of thing. Again, it's a lot of fun. We get to tackle some pretty interesting problems here day by day. So as far as, you know, the passion behind what we do and what gets us out of bed in the morning, just kind of speaking to some of our drivers here, as I mentioned, we're very design oriented first. You know, we want to build great products, but most folks are really engaging, obviously, with the interface. We want to make sure, again, it's easy to use, it's fun for users if that's appropriate, or at least, you know, something they can quickly get value out of as needed. Team of problem solvers here. We focus a lot on delivering a great experience and overall ROI, of course, for our clients. So in addition to just doing great technical work, we really try to educate our clients, you know, on technology as much as possible, make sure they feel comfortable as they kind of delve into the world of building out custom software products. And then, yeah, the last thing I'll mention here is we're very involved in the Atlanta community. So if you're local, you know, we host several different meetups. We do a lot of work with early stage entrepreneurs that are just trying to get feedback on their ideas and, you know, what it would require to build something out or bring that to life. And, you know, the next slide is, again, hopefully just speaking to our credibility. We're lucky that we've gotten a lot of positive recognition for the work that we do. You know, we're consistently rated a top development firm, a top app development company, a top design agency here in Atlanta. And, you know, I definitely encourage you all to review some of our customer reviews. And so most of these awards are very much based on, of course, our portfolio, but also feedback that's been gathered from our clients. And last slide here is just speaking to a handful of clients that we've worked with over the years. So again, very lucky because we've gotten to work with some big brands that, you know, folks recognize like Porsche or Emory, but also have worked with some really exciting funded startups in the area, like Gather being a good example. So yeah, we're a pretty versatile team in terms of where we come in, the different types of organizations we work with, and how we can deliver value. So again, hopefully that was good, just to give you all like a very brief introduction to who we are and why we're speaking on this topic. And yeah, I think now I'm going to pass it over to Jyotsna for like the true content of the webinar here.
Great, yeah, thanks for that, Richard. Now that you know about us, we'd have to jump into the main meat of the topic. So we'll be discussing how you'd like to get started with your app. We'll be talking about the different stages of an app, and then what are the steps as you try to scope your app. So a lot of it includes customer discovery, research, understanding your goals and visions, documenting all of that, the features, technical specifications, what is wireframing, and a little bit on how to put that together. And finally, what are the costs involved in creating this app? We'll also address, have a Q&A session towards the end. So feel free to add your questions in the box that you see on your screen. But if not, like I said, we'll take some time towards the end to have a discussion. The first thing would be, why do you even need an app? We get a lot of clients that come to us, looking to build an app, and we really feel that a lot of times that's not the right step to start with. If you're looking to just validate an idea, there are a lot of different ways to do that. So, there you can create landing pages, and I'll show you an MVP for Buffer, which is a social media platform, and how they just created a landing page first to validate their idea. A lot of companies start with a manual process. So for example, if you're looking to build a marketplace, creating a list of vendors, customers, connecting them manually first to see if there's an interest, and then thinking about how to automate that process. Even when Airbnb started, they just had they started during a conference in San Francisco. They had a mattress that they put out in their in their living room and put out an ad to see if anyone was interested in renting just a mattress in their space. So there are a lot of ways, like I said, you can validate an idea. Once you've decided to that you want to move forward with the app because your idea is great, or if you already have a process that you've been following and you'd like to automate that, then of course, technology is the best way to go. So thinking about building that app will help improve efficiency. It can also be a new revenue channel. So there are a lot of stores out there today that are releasing their apps because that helps increase their market share. It can be a marketing tool. So when you're engaging, when your customers are engaging with your app, you can provide offers right then and there. You can also boost customer engagement. So, there you can put out blogs to educate your customers. You can have like different calculators and tools that ultimately help increase purchase and increase use of your app. Of course, you can also improve customer experience, making sure your customers can find exactly what they're looking for through technology, through an app. So having different search capabilities, eventually also having recommendation engines where you recommend, these are the other things that similar customers have looked at or purchased. And all of that can be done because you're collecting data. So using an app, you can collect a lot of data, get a lot of insights, and ultimately, like I said, all of these reasons are great reasons to think about using technology and building out an app. So once you've decided to build out that app, scoping that app has various different stages. But before that, we want to understand what kind of product you're looking to build. So again, before you even get to an app, you can create a clickable prototype. And one example is, I'll show you on my screen here an example of a prototype that we created. I think you don't see my screen.
Can't see it, unfortunately, so I'll just share the screen here. There we go. Now I can see it.
So that's the prototype we created for one of our clients. So you can see, this gives you something tangible that has, your vision. It gives you the look and the feel of what you're looking to build, but it doesn't really store anything. And so you can click on the entire user flow. So you can start discovery. Once you go to the next stage, you can move on to selecting the different types of, styles you would like. So you can really use this to showcase your vision, get a lot of feedback, put this in front of investors to showcase your idea. And this is not something you would totally scrap. So once you get a lot of feedback, these are essentially, this is like the front end. So you can still use this. We'll create a back end and eventually use this to create that app. But it's a great low cost, low risk way to get started. So yeah, coming back to the clickable prototype, so that's the first way, and really step 0, step 1 of building that app. Or you can directly jump into an MVP. So again, an MVP is a minimum viable product. So thinking about the absolute minimum set of features that you need to prove the value or showcase the value of your product. After that, you would go to the next stage, which is the beta stage. And the reason we're listing out these different stages is because, an app is a living thing. Once you go down this route, you're constantly updating, you're constantly maintaining and growing this product. So starting small in the beginning is the best way, unless, of course, you already have, like I said, a manual process or a product that's, out there, but it's just not, you'd like to automate it. So in those cases, you would probably go directly into the beta phase. And then, as companies move forward, they think about scaling their product and reaching a phase where it's a more mature product.
I was going to mention, Jyotsna, sorry to interrupt you, but we've kind of reverted on GoToMeeting where you can see both slides. It might be better if we can just see the one so it's a little larger. I feel like it might be hard for folks to see.
All right.
Yeah, that's great.
So the next phase would be, like I said, we're going on and on about, benefits and, why MVP is the way to go, especially if it's a new idea. Because again, we get folks right from enterprise clients to startups, and we really encourage them to start small and think about really the minimum set of features, because that way is, it's low cost, low risk. You can get a lot of feedback. You can go bring your product to the market faster and basically start getting feedback so you can actually build a product that your users want rather than based on your assumptions or what you think they need. So here are a few examples. Like I talked about earlier, when Buffer started, they're a social media platform where you can, schedule all your tweets, all your Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook posts. But when they started, they only started for Twitter, as well as they didn't have the product. They just put out a landing page to see if people would like such a product. So it was basically a landing page that asks you, is this something you're interested in? And if you are, please leave us your email. They also then started putting in some pricing so that they could see, what people would be open to paying for something like this. Similarly, Uber's MVP was also, it only started for a particular market. So it just started in San Francisco, where it was an on-demand car service. It didn't have, any of the features you see now. No Uber pool, no real-time calculation of when your Uber is going to get to you, when you're going to get to your location. It was simply a service that you could build, book an on-demand car service from using your iPhone or via SMS. So, like I said, we're just, showing you these examples to hopefully help you understand, that you should try to cut down and build an MVP first. Especially, like I said, if it's a new idea. Now, once you've decided what kind of app you're looking to build, the first step, again, like I said, to us, which is super important, I can't stress this enough, is customer discovery. We get a lot of clients who haven't gone through this process, and usually we send them back to the drawing board, ask them to, definitely do this step first before they come back to us. So customer discovery, in essence, is making sure you're talking to your customers. So we encourage, doing at least 100 customer discovery sessions. So talking to at least 100 customers, and that's basically your target audience, creating and mapping that out in terms of what that persona looks like, how they go about their activity, and how this app will be used in their daily life. What is the features that they value the most? how they'll access this app. So that will inform a lot of decisions. So you can build web apps or mobile apps. Now web apps, they're accessible through desktop, they're accessible through mobile as well. But mobile apps are only through mobile. So there are various reasons why you would decide one or the other. If your customers are using it, on the desktop at work, then a web app would make more sense. But if they're on the go, they have a lot of network issues, or if it's something they come back to every single day, then they would like to have the mobile app, for instance. So basically talking to them to understand what makes the most sense rather than making assumptions, like I said. Also doing some competitor research. If there are similar products out there, what features do they have? What are the customers talking about? Making a note of all of that will really help towards building a product that people really value and want to use. The next step, once you've discussed all of this with your different users and audience, you can definitely start documenting now what your goal and your vision is for this product. Again, it's important for ultimately we're doing all of this because you would work with a developer or an agency like ours to build this product and bring it to life. And so it's important for us to understand your broader vision. So for example, if you're building a web app right now and eventually you do want a mobile app, then there are a lot of ways in which we can make sure that we reuse the back end such that eventually we'll create the mobile app version as well. So knowing your broader vision, your goals is important. We'll also, now that you know what is important to your customers from the customer discovery, you can decide what kind of metrics you need, what you should be tracking to demonstrate that value. Because ultimately, like I said, you'd want to make sure that this product is getting you an ROI. What kind of technologies you will use, again, that depends on your users. What might be your monetization strategy or business model. If this is a product within an existing company, then there might be some branding and design guidelines that you might want to get from your team, understanding the timeline. So these are certain things that is important to know for the developer and for you to document. Finally, of course, we like to talk about features and technical specifications. So first talking about the features, again, now that you've done our customer discovery, you have a very good idea of what are the core features and then what are the nice to have features. Because like I said, your developer or the agency you work with would like to know what's in the future, what's going to come. Do you need different user roles, permissions, read views for some people, write views for some people? Do you need an admin portal, because you might want some reporting, some analytics, what kind of search capabilities you want to build in? Again, like I said, if there are network issues for your users, then do you want to build in some offline capabilities? Do you want to integrate with any services? So a lot of people nowadays, when you log in, you see Google login or LinkedIn login. Again, those are nice to have features. It's not something you have to have in the beginning. So, what kind of third-party services you'd like to integrate with in the future? Do you want to have payment options like Stripe, or if you're, building something where you want to integrate with hardware like temperature sensing of some kind? What kind of storage you require for your data? That will decide, what kind of cloud services you need. So just like I said, documenting all of that is helpful. Some of them you might not have the answers right now, especially the technical specifications part, but it's important to have these conversations with whoever you're going to work with. So what kind of devices are you going to make it compatible with? Again, if you're building a mobile and web app, or the different components of that. If you're a healthcare app, then security is super important. There are a lot of HIPAA considerations, so thinking about that, what kind of maintenance you will require. So all of these questions, documenting that, or at least having that in your documents so that you have those conversations is important. Finally, once you have all of that, kind of documented, the next step would be wireframing. Now, wireframing is basically thinking about the user flow or the navigation pattern. So again, this is a super important step, and this is something that we, as a company, also focus on, because this is a very big part of the UI UX or the design process. The design process doesn't necessarily only mean, the colors, but it's more about building this intuitive process. And so, making sure that there's a easy flow to this. An easy way to think about this is, with Snapchat, when they actually launched the app, they went the opposite way. They wanted to make it super hard for people to find everything on the app, because they didn't want, parents to easily find things. So that's the opposite way. Usually we want to make sure that as soon as someone works with your web or mobile app, they can easily find and move to the next steps and the actions that you want them to perform. So sketching that out is helpful. You can use tools like InVision or Balsamic to create these wireframes. If not, even just, as you can see on my screen, even just sketching that out with all of the flows, what does the login page look like once they log in? There are two processes. Like if they forgot password, then this is the screen for that. If they logged in successfully, then it takes them to the home page, and then these are the actions they can perform. So just, putting all of that together is very helpful for your developer. And once we get this usually from the client, like I said, we ensure we build every single screen before we start building the product. So because it's much easier and even more cost effective to iterate on design and the process at this stage, rather than building out a product and then change anything. So we make sure that we have all of the screens, every single user screen mapped out before we build or code anything. And that way is, even you are on the same, the client is on the same page as us. Again, we can get a lot of feedback from users as well as stakeholders before we actually build the product. At some points for our clients, like I said, after this stage, we even go into the clickable prototype. And after the clickable prototype, we start building the product. Finally, this is the main part. How much does it cost? What are the different costs for building your app? So like I said, there are your design and your development costs. That is that's definitely a part of this whole process. But there's also things like marketing costs. So once you launch your app, you have to market your app. Like I said, this is a living thing, so there's constant maintenance, what that cost might look like. And then if you're using different services like, text messaging service or Stripe integration, or like cloud services like AWS, all of that has a cost component associated with it. So, understanding what those costs might look like so you can appropriately fund your app. Again, funding your app can be based on like bootstrapping or crowdfunding or having investors. So, and sometimes, even having this discussion and sharing that with the company you're working with or the developer you're working with is super helpful, because ultimately an app is, can be like a home. You can build a house for, maybe $200,000 and you can build it for, $1 million. So how the house would be built, what kind of materials will be used, can all be decided based on the budget. So if you have a budget that you're working with, we definitely recommend sharing that so that your developer understands that this is what you have to work with, and gives you the best path. Today there are also a lot of if you're starting small, creating MVPs, there are also this whole no-code development space where it can be much cheaper because you can reuse a lot of components. For people who aren't familiar with no code, again, it's basically there are new platforms out there like Betty Blocks or Bubble. We actually have an event coming up on the 6th of November, and we'll be sharing all of those details soon. It's about no code and how a lot of startups today are building their MVP in no code. So no code is an easy way to use a lot of drag and drop features to build web applications. So you can get to a particular stage, and then, like I said, once you validate your idea, you get a lot of feedback, then you can actually build that product. But that way is, it's much more cost effective. And again, we can take some questions on no code if that's of interest, but definitely check out our event where we will be having speakers who've used that platform to build their idea. So that's it for now. We'll jump into questions. Let me see if.
Yeah.
Did you see?
I did see that one person chatted in an initial question that obviously we can address. And then
I don't see that. Oh, okay, yeah.
And for other folks on the call, there's about 17 people on the call. So, we might unmute everyone, but it could be a little chaotic. You can also chat a question, of course, and we'll just speak to that. And then there's also a great feature in here where you can kind of raise your hand. You can indicate, that you'd like to ask a question, and we can unmute you that way. So yeah, we've left kind of the last 15 minutes or so because we obviously figured there'd probably be a lot of questions, and that would be maybe how we could deliver the most value, is just fielding those and trying to help anyone that's trying to figure out kind of how to begin navigating this path. So the first question that I saw that's been chatted was, how do you get feedback from your clickable prototype? What are some ways that you can test it out? That's a great question. So, there's a number of ways. So the clickable prototype that Jyotsna showed earlier, for example, that lives on the web. So there's a URL for it. And this would be the case for any clickable prototype we create. So that's something you can share easily. Obviously you might share that with colleagues, with friends for basic feedback, but more importantly, you really want to be getting that in front of who you perceive to be your target user, right? Because a lot of the whole idea here, and one of the main reasons for pursuing a clickable prototype, is that you want to test your assumptions of who is going to use this, why, how are they going to use it, do they find it valuable? So there's a number of ways to do that, and search out those people depending on who you expect to be the user, what industry you're playing in. I mean, when it comes to customer discovery, the most extreme example that I know some people truly do is you might be out on the street trying to get people's attention to give you feedback on a particular concept. Again, if it's a more specific industry, you might be really searching out contacts in your network that live in that world that can give you, really candid feedback on the prototype or on your concept in general. And again, the main thing there is just you don't want to be talking to people that are just your buddies, because they're going to tell you it's great. They're going to tell you what you want to hear. You want to be in front of people that, will be very candid, and you can kind of see how they interact with the clickable prototype. Again, they might think it's cool, but is it something they're going to pay for? Does it really solve a pain point in their lives, or is your assumption they're misguided? So kind of a long answer, but there's a lot of ways to kind of get that stuff in front of the right.
And then creating a survey. I'm sure there are a lot of ways to create surveys, once they check out your prototype, so that you can document those answers and use some analytics to better understand the feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I don't see any more questions. Again, if you guys if anyone wants to talk, feel free to use the raise a hand button that you see. I'm not sure if you guys see it, but if you can, then I'll try to unmute you. If you can post your questions either in the question box or in the chat, that's fine too. I guess we have a couple of things that we know that might be some interesting questions that we get a lot. Like I said, we have a lot of clients that we work with, a lot of startups that we work with, and so we kind of get a lot of these questions. One of which is probably what the costs might look like for app development. Now again, it's really hard to just put a number out there, because like I said, it's just, there are just so many things or elements on estimating a product, and a clickable prototype obviously might be a very low cost way for you to get started. And usually building a simple clickable prototype might be in the lowest range, I would say, and the simplest starting range, I would say, probably would be a 10, 15K, which is why I talked about the no code development, because sometimes if you're looking to build a complete MVP in that budget, then no code might be the way to go, because that is something, again, you could do no code in that, under like starting at like a 20K range. But if you truly want to build an app or an MVP that, again, is simplistic, but there are a lot of components that go into building an app, the whole design process. Sometimes there's just a lot of iterations, a lot of feedback and rounds that we go through, and so it's super hard to give a specific cost. But I would say, starting at least somewhere in the 25 to 30K range for an MVP, and a simple MVP is can get you somewhere. Again, these are all just ranges. It really depends on the type of company you work with. If you go offshore, you can probably get it cheaper, but that's definitely not a route that we recommend. I would rather you consider the no code than go offshore, because again, just because an hourly rate is cheaper or the cost is cheaper does not mean ultimately the end product will be cheaper, because once you get into a contract with a developer, if you don't really believe in their work, then they could start with giving you a low cost, but now you're stuck with them, and to finally give you the version that you truly want, it can just start adding up. So that's why we wouldn't recommend that. We would say finding the company or the developer you have confidence in, getting some estimates, and making sure they stand by a little bit on their estimates for what they're scoping is the best way to move forward. Or considering other ways like clickable prototypes, no code development would be the best way if you don't have that kind of budget.
I was going to say, let's go to the next slide just so folks can see that. But then we do have a few questions that have been asked in the chat here, which is awesome. So yeah, so Chris asked, how do you market your app? Which is a great question. I think we have, good expertise to share on that. Now, bear in mind, of course, we're focused, mostly on kind of the technology strategy and implementation. There's obviously separate marketing firms, stuff like that, but definitely depends. So, depends on the type of app, right? And the audience that, you're trying to get engagement with. So if you're doing something like business to consumer, for example, which, you think of like the Facebook app or Instagram, where they just want anyone and everyone to kind of use this product, that might be more marketing on social media, doing kind of broader like viral campaigns, kind of like you're marketing any consumer product where you're really just trying to get it out there to anyone and everyone that might use it. Now, if you're doing a more business-oriented app, and typically more of our clients are, business-focused products that they're trying to sell to, very specific types of organizations, that's a little different, because you might not get as much value out of like running a bunch of Facebook ads, right? A lot of times that might be more of targeted outreach to particular organizations, more of a sales strategy, maybe more of a content-driven marketing strategy where you really want to be perceived, for example, as really a thought leader in logistics. And in addition to sharing valuable information, people can benefit from. You have products like applications they can license from you to better run their logistics business or whatever that is. So it definitely depends. Obviously, marketing is a whole other,
yeah, I mean, there are like, sending out, to your newsletter, if you already have that, like with Buffer's MVP, they already had a list of people who are interested in that product. So before launching your app, creating that landing page to start collecting, interest, that's one way. Obviously it's going to be on the App Store. If you're creating a mobile app, then that's also one way to discover different apps. The App Store features like App of the Day. There are different processes to get featured on that. Applying for app awards, that might be one. And then, marketing, like Richard said, is a whole different thing. There, basically a lot of different ways you can market an app, and that would be best, to work with an agency that could help you think about that. But these are some initial ways, and we also try to help our customers get some coverage, do a press release for the apps, and help them the best way we can to get the word out there.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. So another question we had here from Daniel, and questions keep coming in. This is awesome. So maybe we'll try to go through these a little more quickly to make sure we can get all of these.
Yeah,
so,
we just needed to get started, and now we have so many.
So, excuse me, Daniel asked more about no coding. So I think the last thing, we'll keep this one succinct, but it is super interesting. I would encourage Daniel, you or anyone else on the call, the two products that we're most familiar with, although there's more, frankly, is one is called Bubble. So if you Google Bubble no code, you'll find it right away.
Bubble.is. Yeah.
Bubble.is, I guess, is
That's the website.
The website.
Yeah.
And then the other one that we're most familiar with is Betty Blocks. So it's Betty Blocks. Similarly, you could find that quickly. And long story short, there's just more of a movement to make coding and building apps more accessible, which is awesome. So these are just platforms that you don't have to be super technical. You certainly don't have to be like a full-fledged developer to build out, mostly it's web applications,
right?
That can be mobile responsive. They'll work on a mobile phone too. So it's not always a good fit. There's certainly some limitations because you're kind of working within their platform that it's not custom, right? So there's certain things you might not be able to do. You're a little bit tied to their platform, but there are some overwhelming benefits too, especially for an early stage product where, if you just want to, without breaking the bank, get something out there functional that, kind of proves the concept or serves as an MVP, they're awesome in that sense.
And we can also help, thinking through that, since this is fairly new. It's something we're also super interested in, and we have some expertise in. So if anyone's interested in talking about whether no code is the right way to move forward, we're happy to kind of talk through that. Again, you can still work with an agency like ours to create your no-code app. It's just that it would be cheaper. Like I said, it wouldn't be totally custom because you're not using, a developer of that caliber in building some of the other apps that we create when we use React and Ruby on Rails. So you're definitely using someone who is, again, doesn't have that much experience, but is very well, experienced with these platforms. So it's kind of like what WordPress and Wix and stuff are doing for websites, what these platforms are trying to do for applications. And we have the event coming up on 6th of November, and yeah, you'll definitely get an email about that. So that's going to be in Atlanta. So we'd love for you guys to join us.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Next question is, how do you measure success with an MVP or at any stage of researching the potential market? Really good question. There's like everything, there's not a very simple answer here. I mean, I think if you're talking about measuring success for researching the potential market, let's say in the customer discovery phase, for example, I mean, success, would be really getting strong affirmation that your concept is something people really want. I think it would be affirmation that, you understand this user, what their pain points are. And this is one reason that people are often are more likely to be successful when they pursue a product in an industry they're very familiar with, or they're trying to solve a problem that they've experienced personally. You want to make sure that, again, this is something that's a sufficient pain point for people to really make a change, adopt a new product, pay for it. So those kind of affirmations, and then, success with an MVP, again, all depends. If you're doing something more business to consumer, just the most obvious example would be if you had built the early version of Twitter and just a ton of people start using it, and that's your main goal is user adoption, that would be a win, right? Whereas if you're building something more business oriented, it might not necessarily be about a ton of adoption, but can you land 3 paying clients with this MVP?
Right.
But mostly it has to do with is it well received? Do people use it? Do they perceive a lot of value? Is it something that is going to become pretty integral to their day to day and provide ongoing value.
Yeah, and that's why we talked about having those metrics in mind. So ultimately, if user adoption is the right metric for you, then making sure you're tracking that with your MVP, because otherwise, how would you know? Or if your metric is, like I said, getting three, like Richard said, getting clients, then that should be your MVP. If there are also different things where you can, make sure that your customers are doing certain actions within the app and track that. So if they're reaching this particular step, then for you that's a win. That means it's bringing them like a value. So being able to track those metrics becomes important.
Mm-hmm. Great, awesome. These are good questions. Next question was, how do you approach clients, or do they come to you? I guess, is this addressed like at us for Tyrannosaurus Tech? I'm kind of assuming.
Yeah.
So,
sales again is a different ballgame.
Yeah. So if this is referring to an app, obviously, again, I think that all depends on like what type of app you're building and who you're trying to market it to. Obviously, if you're doing, again, something very business oriented, you might literally have sales reps like calling into businesses to see if they can pitch them on it. So for us, if that's the question, it's both. The type of business we're in, the vast majority of our clients, come from kind of our network, from doing things like this, from trying to put good content out there and help educate people, referrals. So it's both. We obviously try to have some outbound efforts as well and do marketing and whatnot, but a lot of folks do come to us because they heard from someone else, a friend or someone that worked with us.
Yeah, and there's a lot of local marketing also that you can focus on. So even with an app or your business, there's local marketing. In general, there are a lot of Atlanta has a lot of different resources out there. So we definitely recommend, as you start get started on this process, checking out ATDC. They do a lot of customer discovery workshops, if I'm not mistaken. They're in Midtown. There's Atlanta Tech Village. Again, they have a lot of events focused around customer discovery, startups. So yeah, definitely checking them out, being on Meetup as you are on our Meetup. Feel free to let us know if there are any particular suggestions on what kind of content you want to see out there. If there's some topics that you guys are super interested in, feel free to email us and we'll try to have an event focused on that.
Yep. And then the last question I see here that's actually in like the chat is, do you have a research crew to help with customer discovery and prototype product evaluations? Yes. So we often are involved, very early in the process. So we're not necessarily, going to send like people out on the street to facilitate customer discovery, but we do a lot of advising and consulting on that front. So like we can help offer a lot of guidance into how to intelligently go about that process. And we can certainly do some of the heavy lifting on some of like the user and market research. And then of course, certainly, once we get into prototyping, that sort of thing, obviously that's very much in our wheelhouse. So yes, many of our engagements were involved really from those early stages. And that's awesome for us because, I think we get to provide very broad value, not just in designing and building out a great product, but helping strategize on what that will become, especially the initial MVP.
Yeah, we have a very consultative approach. So we're super open to chatting about anything and, we've been in this space for a long time. So even if we're not the right partner for something, we're very happy to talk to our clients and make sure they're connecting with the right people, the right network, and getting that information, because ultimately, we're successful if our client is successful. So we're definitely open to, like I said, anyone reaching out to us. We're also super involved in the community, so we mentor a lot of startups. Both Richard and our other founder, Carlos, does a lot of mentoring. So yeah, we're open to people reaching out to us and making sure we're getting them connected with the resources they need.
Cool. That was the last of like the questions that were posted. I know we're kind of up to the top of the hour. I mean, we're happy to stay on if people have other questions. Okay, cool. I see Chris posed one. So Chris said, how important is branding in the app development and design process? That's a really good question. I think it is important. Absolutely. Now, as Jyotsna had spoke to, also, we're big proponents of keeping things pretty lean early on in a product. So I absolutely think it's important to define the brand, have a basic style guide and some basic branding guidelines. These are things that in our design process we help create. But again, I think with an early stage product, you don't have a Coca-Cola marketing and branding budget, and that would be not necessarily a wise use of your funds. So we keep that pretty lean. It also depends, again, on the type of app you're building. Like if you are doing something more consumer focused where the brand is like super important, we might, recommend going in further depth than, again, if you're selling something into the logistics industry. That doesn't mean that the branding isn't important, but people are probably not going to be quite as influenced in their, buying decision by the brand as they are by like your credibility in the space, the relationships you have, your expertise, et cetera. So pretty important, but it depends.
I think that's about it.
Yeah, and then these other questions that we had listed here as like frequently asked questions, I think Jyotsna mostly spoke to. Are there any of those that
Some of them, like the hiring versus freelancer versus agency, we have a white paper on that on our website. And yeah, I guess if any of these were burning questions for you guys, feel free to also email us after this webinar. We're happy to chat one-on-one or, answer these questions by email. So, we just would like to respect everyone's time and make sure that we're covering things that are important to the whole group.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. These were all really great questions. Appreciate you all being engaged. And as Jyotsna said, we do a lot of, free initial consultations. We're always happy to just hear what you're working on, your idea, kind of give our initial input on feasibility, or is this something that's really, involved and expensive to build out? Is it fairly simple? We're happy to have those conversations, and just don't hesitate to reach out to us. And again, we've got some great content on the website, and we host, physical meetups, as Jyotsna mentioned as well. So there's a lot of ways to kind of engage with us and try to get some expertise along the way. So
great, and we'll hopefully share this webinar with everyone who registered, as well as details on our next event on no-code development. So looking forward to hopefully meeting you guys in person. All right.
Cool.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you all.